Hey, friends! Merry Christmas! Yes, it's Christmas time once again. I'm pretty excited. I got my little janglers on and everything. I didn't learn my lesson from last year. They're a real pain in the ass. But anyway, to help start things off this year, we have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That's right. Hence the jinglers. They kind of sound just like Santa's sleigh. Little annoying, though. But anyway, now you know Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen and all the rest. But then there was Rudolph. Let's be clear here. Rudolph was a loser. He had a shiny nose, and that meant nobody wanted to be around him or play reindeer games with him because he was a freak. And that gave Rudolph a case of the sads, but he was able to make good in the end, because the story of Rudolph is proof positive of that age-old idiom which says people don't like you until they think you can be of use to them. Now, let's be honest, aside from Gene Autry's rendition of the original song, the only version of the Rudolph story you need to know or care about is the classic Rankin and Bass Santa Magic Holiday Special from 1964. All others are a pale imitation of Rudolphery. But that doesn't stop some people from trying, and they never seem to get it right. So I thought we'd take a look at some other Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeers, just to prove the point. First, we have this cartoon here, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 1948. This was directed by the legendary Max Fleischer and was one of the last animated projects he worked on. Now, this one is different in that, unlike other Rudolph stories, the reindeer don't actually live at the North Pole with Santa. He has his team on hand, sure, but all of the other reindeer live someplace else. Santa doesn't appear to have any elves either. Anyway, I thought this was funny. After the other reindeer get done razzing Rudolph, he runs home to Mama, and she wears a dress and an apron. But pretty much all of the other reindeer we see, male and female, they run around buck naked. And where's Rudolph's dad? Rudolph's mom is a widow, maybe. I like to think she's a divorcee, but whatever. Rudolph ain't got no dad, unless Mom there had hot makeouts with a stoplight. So in this one, Santa discovers Rudolph while trying to make his rounds on that foggy Christmas Eve. He uses Rudolph to help save the day with his shiny nose, but he never asked the mom's permission to take her son on a trip around the world, and he's a minor. So basically, he kidnapped Rudolph. That's kidnapping right there. Exploitation. And that's why you don't trust a stranger who shows up late at night in your room dressed up like Santa Claus. Fortunately for Rudolph, this is the real Santa. Spoiler alert! Rudolph saves Christmas and winds up being a big hero. And now all those hot does who turn their noses up at him are lifting up their tails for him instead. You go ahead and enjoy yourself, Rudolph. You've earned it. Next up is this thing. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the movie from 1998. This thing is awful. So in this one, Rudolph gets razzed by the other reindeer, but he keeps trying to see the bright side of things, and with a nose like his, there's nothing else he can see. Santa offers some words of encouragement, and he even meets a cute doe named Clarice, Zoe. And he also has an enemy, Arrow, who looks an awful lot like Fireball from the Rankin Bass special, doesn't he? He's basically the school jock who has claimed Zoe for himself, so he's a big jerk. Well, things come to a head at the Reindeer Games, which literally are like the Olympic Games, I guess, where Arrow cheats and never gets called out for it. Well, Rudolph gets disqualified for shining his nose in Arrow's face during the race. Rudolph gets a case of the sads and runs away from home. On his journey, he meets this here white fox, and a polar bear makes friends with him. Meanwhile, trouble is brewing in the form of this Bumble. That is this evil Snow Queen lady who is mad at Santa. She captures Zoe, and then Rudolph and his new friends. Things look pretty bad on account of she's brewed up a giant storm on Christmas Eve, which makes sense since her name is Stormella, I guess. And Rudolph has to save Christmas. Our heroes get a little help from these Northern Lights fairies. That's what they are. That's what they call themselves. Now, this thing is pretty lousy. It was produced by Goodtimes Entertainment. Remember them? They usually did direct-to-video stuff and reissuing public domain movies and whatnot on VHS back in the day. This was their only theatrical release, and it bombed hard. Mainly for two reasons. First, the animation is simply not of a theatrical quality. It's very charmless and cheap-looking. The music is pretty forgettable, too. No memorable original songs to speak of. Secondly, the movie was released in mid-October. There were other poor decisions here. They paid for the rights to use a Paul McCartney Christmas song, A Wonderful Christmas Time, but they only used a small portion of it. Why? McCartney songs cost money. They could have just written their own original song, used more of it, and not spent the dough on McCartney. It's not as if the little snippet they used moved the needle at all. Aside from McCartney, there are two other singers of note on the soundtrack, though. Country singer Clint Black and Jennifer Warnes both contributed to separate songs. The only thing this really has going for it is the cast, but like McCartney's Christmas song, most don't have all that much to do. John Goodman is the big name brand. He plays Santa, and he gets a fair amount of screen time, and even gets to sing a song, if you can call it that. Whoopi Goldberg plays Stormella. Again, she's here, she's supposed to be a big threat, but she's absent from events a lot of the time. Debbie Reynolds shows the flag as Mrs. Santa and the school marm, Mrs. Prancer. Eric Idle plays the fox. He gets a little bit to do. Bob Newhart plays a polar bear, and Richard Simmons plays this elf. That's right, the Richard Simmons. Newhart fares the worst with only a few scanty lines, and Simmons doesn't get that much to do either. The animation is cheap, the songs are forgettable, and you could go through life without seeing this one just fine. Finally, how about this red-nosed monstrosity? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Island of Misfit Toys from 2001. Here there's a mysterious toy thief stealing toys, and Rudolph and his friends have to stop him and save Christmas. Yes, ostensibly this is based on the classic Rankin Bass special, but it has to be the worst thing I've seen in some time, not counting the Thanksgiving movie. Ugh. Admittedly, that was worse. No charming animagic here, folks, just god-awful 3D CGI. Ugh. So while the characters may look familiar, they're just soulless abominations. The CGI either wasn't up to the task at the time, or the studio just cheaped out on this one. Richard Dreyfuss stands in for Sam the Snowman, and Jamie Lee Curtis voices a hippo. Rick Moranis plays the Toy Taker. Kathleen Barr plays Rudolph. She was in Dragon Tales and played Dot Matrix in Reboot. Remember that? And Scott McNeil from Dragon Ball Z and Beast Wars, he plays Hermie the Elf. I'll give these two a little credit. They did try to match the classic sound of the original characters' voices from the Rankin Bass special. They made the effort here. Doesn't save this thing, though. It has the reek of a wrecked Rudolph rehash, because that's what it is. Nightmare fuel that's best avoided. So, all things considered, the original holiday special from Rankin Bass, or Gene Autry for the song. I'll allow Dean Martin's version of Rudolph, too, because Dean Martin. But if you want some Rudolphery, those are your go-to choices. You be good, like you know you should, and I'll see you in the next one.